So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I make videos mainly on the MBTI, focusing on the cognitive functions, and I like to go in depth into the Jungian psychology as well as the Enneagram types and sometimes also socionics to help you to better understand yourself and deal with the world on your own terms. So if you want to show me support, you can follow me at Personality Story. Also, you can buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com or become a patron. I have personality themed merch that you can check out in the description box below. So let's get started today on this topic that honestly, I make videos on things that I myself am struggling with. So I do struggle with a lot of TE criticism, and I think I talked about it in many other videos as well. And it's because I'm going through stuff that I myself experience, so that's why I feel like I am kind of my own consultant, and it's like the tried and tested methods, to help you to also face the issues and know how to work through them. So I think I talked about it a few times before, but basically for INFJs and extroverted thinking, because we don't really have the function in our function stack, and we also have it as a polar function, which is a socionics term for our blind spots, meaning that we are usually caught at a loss because we don't really know how extroverted thinking works. I mean, we take a lot longer to kind of have a grasp on TE things. It takes us time. The thing is, we tend to be slower at things that are extroverted thinking related, like data, statistics, things that are Excel sheet focused, and just very heavy, like numbers and data points, and kind of analyzing that. All these are extroverted thinking style kind of subjects, and criticism itself is also difficult for us to deal with because we have extroverted feeling that responds to people's emotional states and judgments of us pretty strongly, I would say. But how do we exactly respond to TE in a way that would benefit us? I think that is the ultimate question, because I feel like every time we experience something, it is our responsibility and also our choice to allow it to help us, because things already happened, so you might as well make something good out of it, right? So one really important way to respond to TE criticism is to take the constructive side of it and to neutralize the toxic side of it. So what I mean is that a lot of times when you get criticized by TE dominant people, whether it's the ESTJ or the ENTJ, I think more often by the ESTJ, since they are more demanding of sensing types of activities from us, and we're usually quite bad at very SITE stuff. But we can also see it as a really good learning opportunity, because a lot of times we are not able to see the things that we have trouble with and the things that we can actually use to help us to get better in many areas of life. So taking the constructive side of the feedback is actually really, really helpful. And if you know a bit of my background, actually I would say that personally I did owe a lot of my success to TE dominant types, even though the moments may not feel as good. So for example, when I was in Chinese dance many years back as a primary school student, I think I was around 8 years old, and I actually managed to get really good at some of the flexibility exercises, because my Chinese dance teacher was an ESTJ. She's a very classic ESTJ, She's like really into traditional arts. She's a very traditional person in general, and super fierce. Just like I think everybody kind of is scared of her. But I managed to be able to accomplish a lot of the things that I didn't know I could because of her TE kind of pushiness. And so taking constructive feedback is actually really helpful. If you think about it, also another example is that I had an ENTJ English and math teacher for a while, and I was actually a top student under her. Like I became a top student under her. So that is because I worked on the constructive feedback part. And TE types are really good at giving feedback because that's what they do. Like they just love giving feedback. I don't know why, but like that's just somehow their passion. They just like to give feedback to everybody, even if you never ask for it. So you can use it for your advantage though. So when they point out something that you have done, you ask yourself, is it really true? And if it is indeed true, then you have to like find a way to maybe, improve on the said thing, or to find a way to get around it in the future. So for example, if someone tells you that you have not been very consistent and you tend to rely too much on your emotions when it comes to accomplishing tasks, like I reflected upon it and I realized that is true, because even with this channel, you will notice that in some of the past months I didn't like upload as frequently when I actually could. I mean, every single video doesn't take that long, but sometimes we as NF types, we care a lot about passion and our emotions and how we want to have some kind of intrinsic motivation to do things. But that can also lead to a lot of procrastination and lack of consistency, whereas TE types are really good at just like probably bulldozing their emotions, and they can just get to it because they need to get to it. And I think that is something that we can also learn, because a lot of times I realize that passion doesn't just come from emotions, it also comes from the acts of doing. So sometimes you can think about something for a really long time and you just can't find the passion for it, or maybe you have found the passion but you just can't find the motivation to do it. But actually sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes the motivation comes after you start doing it, because the more you do it, the more passionate you get and the better you get. So then it will kind of propel you to do more of it. And that is true to a lot of things in writing as well as in making videos, in many other areas that you can work on. So learning to take feedback and learning to know how you can use the feedback to your advantage is actually really helpful. And another part of it is neutralizing the toxic energy. So sometimes you would notice that certain dominant TE types can deliver their criticism in a way that seem a bit abusive, and it depends on the person. So some people may do it more often than others. So some people may actually include some kind of derogatory connotations in their feedback. And what we have to do then, we have to neutralize that part, because if we don't neutralize that part, it can feel very discouraging. So instead of actually using the feedback to our advantage, we end up feeling like we cannot do anything right, and we are like never good enough, and all the very limiting understanding of ourselves start to come up. And I think one way that we can neutralize the toxic energy is to really understand that that part of the feedback is not personal. So I know it seems very difficult to understand that, and it took me quite a long time to really get it. But you have to understand that people have different backgrounds and people grow up in different environments. And a lot of times when people are behaving in a certain way, when people are having a certain way of communicating that feels kind of uncomfortable or even abusive in some situations, it's because they grew up with it, or they have been treated that way by other people. And it sounds really sad, but this is how it is. Like, people do not just behave in a certain way by themselves. It's usually because they learn it from someone else. And so if someone has been behaving in that way towards them their whole life, like telling them they're stupid, or that they're never good enough, or that they are really slow, or whatever, they're going to kind of internalize that part of it and use that method on other people, because that's the only way that they know how to do it. So even if the feedback they give are actually really useful, the way they deliver it might be influenced by their past and by their generational trauma. I mean, it sounds serious, but that's really how it is. It's generational. And you cannot see that as a personal thing, because that's something that they have gone through. And so that's the only way that they know how to communicate, unfortunately. So that can kind of help to neutralize the toxic part of it, so that you can focus on the more constructive part of it. Okay, so the second way that you can deal with TE criticism is this STP inner self that we all have as INFJs. And it depends on your personality type, right? So this, of course, this video is titled for INFJs, but like if you are a different personality type, you can also rely on your own personality type's strengths. For us, every INFJ has an STP like inner self, and that's because our functions are in reverse to the STP personality. So we have the NIFE as the stronger ones, and we have the TISE as the weaker ones. But you will notice that in many situations, when we develop our TI and SE and the functions work together, we can actually resemble an STP. And that's when you can actually call upon the TISE strengths to help you to have that internal STP strength within yourself, because STPs are really good at proving people wrong. If you know of like STPs, mottos, and kind of their mantras or whatever, they love like proving their haters wrong. And it doesn't even have to be haters. It can also be like just people who don't believe in them, like naysayers, or people who just do not know that they have the potential. And you can't really expect people to understand you or to know your potential. I mean, most likely you are one of the only people who truly understand what you can do, because obviously most people don't have really deep insights about your strengths and your talents. And so what I notice is that sometimes TE criticism can come from a place of just not knowing. Like, for example, I have a ESTJ mom, and she is very pragmatic. She doesn't really believe in like my creative dreams, which I have quite a lot of really big dreams. Like this channel is one of them. Actually, I plan to let it grow to 1K subscribers. And I think that from the progress that I have right now, it's entirely possible. I mean, that's the first step. Eventually I want to reach like 10K and so on. And it can be like a platform for me to also advertise my, books that I publish in the future, which is another of my creative dream. But the thing is, sometimes, your TE critics in your life may not believe in them, because it doesn't really fit in with their more pragmatic approach in life. And in that case, we shouldn't be focusing on like, telling them that they're wrong, or like trying to justify ourselves. TE people operate by seeing results, and that kind of makes sense in itself. I mean, we do have extroverted sensing, so we know that the external reality is really important. I mean, it doesn't matter how many times you tell people, oh my god, I'm going to become this like famous person. I mean, that's not my dream, but like, if someone is going to want that and they want to be really accomplished, but then there's no result. So the TE person is going to be like, okay, so you have all these like pipe dreams. I don't see how you're going to accomplish it, because I don't see any like real life TE facts to back up like your imagination. And in that situation, what we can do is that we can rely on our STP inner strength to have like this prove them wrong mentality by making things happen, and then showing to them that you can do it. So for example, me working on this channel is one way that I'm going to show people how, you know, I can actually do it. Because if you just tell them, oh, I'm going to grow my subscribers, like that's not going to convince them, because you're just using words. Like that's not going to show them that you're actually going to do it. But if you use action and you use like actual results, eventually they would be convinced, because you're going to show them like this is the metric. Okay, metric is a very TE term. So like this is the metric that I achieved. So then you manage to prove them wrong. And the STPs also really like to surprise people with, you know, oh, you don't believe that I can succeed. Well, I'm going to show you that I can. And that is kind of a confidence in itself with like a lot of SE personalities. But you can also use that to your advantage whenever you face that by relying on action, which is the SE part, and also your TI strength, which is, you know, being able to rely on your own logic and your own understanding of events, and to put it into action so that eventually the results will speak for themselves. Okay, so the third point, because I have a lot of information on this video, trying to speed it up a little bit. The third point is to use trauma for success. And I know trauma is a really strong term, but what I tend to notice is that a lot of times really successful people, when I talk to them, okay, sometimes not like actually talk to them, sometimes it's like watching videos of them during interviews. A lot of times you would realize that their turning points in life happen after some kind of trauma. So that trauma for us, it can be, you know, in terms of TE criticism, which we tend to face a lot. Of course, it doesn't always have to be with criticism. It can be other kinds of trauma that you encounter. But we can also use trauma for success. So what I mean by that is we can use trauma to propel us, to make us go in the direction that we really want to go. So one example is we can kind of work on things. We can use trauma to inspire us to work on things that we can get really good at. I mean, some people, you know, when you hear their stories, it's like horrifying. Like they might have gone through like really tragic situations in their lives. They might have you know, in the past, like, I don't know how much you know about traditional arts, but in Asia at least, like a lot of these traditional arts training schools, they traumatize the students so bad. Like some of the students will be like driven to suicide. I mean, that's like maybe 100 years ago, but that was how they trained them, right? They used trauma. Like they would force them to like train for like many hours, and there will be a lot of emotional and physical pain associated with that. But at the end of it, the people who really made it through actually managed to be really, really good at what they're doing. And of course, I'm not saying like you should like take that approach entirely and like traumatize yourself and like, you know, go through intense and physical and emotional pain to get to where you are, because I don't think that you need to necessarily have that approach in life, because that's the flip side of it, is that you can it can take many years for you to undo the psychological effects of that. Even though you can become very successful, but you also have the psychological ramifications that you have to deal with. But what I am encouraging you is to use your past trauma as a way to propel you towards success. If you are a creative person, which I think a lot of INFJs are, you can use your past trauma to, you know, make stories, right? Like to create stories that are really fascinating and like reflective, you know. You can create great art. I mean, a lot of great art is born out of trauma, to be honest. You can use it as some kind of catharsis. You can use it as some kind of, I don't know, emotional outlet. You can write great songs. You can write great short stories, novels, whatever you like to do with it. You can also use trauma to help other people, which is another NF thing that we like to do, right? We like to use our trauma and transmute it into something that is actually healing. And so that's a lot of power in that, because we have already gone through what we have gone through, but we can use it to fuel our healing journey and to also help other people in the process. So, you know, a lot of times when people get traumatized, they are able to examine what is really like wounded in them. So, for example, if you look at, you know, the things that people say about you that you are really, really bothered by, that you tend to be the most hurt by, that is where you can locate your core wounds. So, for example, if you realize that someone said something about you and it just like doesn't go away, and you're very, very, very affected by it, chances are it's something that you yourself are not confident about, and you yourself have been kind of hurt by it many times in your past. For example, if someone is like maybe struggling with weight issues, and he realized that whenever he hears someone, you know, criticize or talk about weight, he may react really strongly to it. And that's a sign that you actually have the wound, right? So it's not so much on controlling how other people are going to say, like what are they going to talk about, because that's not going to solve the root of the issue. The root of the issue is really about your core wound that you have neglected, and it's like festering somewhere. So, you know, examining like your own inner critic and like what you yourself are kind of bothered by is actually a really good way to get into that journey of healing as well. But like, I'm not a licensed therapist, so I would definitely recommend if you go to someone that, you know, who is able to provide those services for you if you do discover some of the core wounds that you have to deal with. Lastly, you can use the T criticism and kind of reverse it. So what I mean is that you would realize sometimes when you are, you know, frequently criticized, or you are frequently bothered by criticism, that you do have a pretty strong inner critic that has been internalized to kind of help you to deal with the external criticism. And that usually happens at quite a young age. You probably use that method to protect yourself, or to as a defense mechanism. You know, you kind of attack yourselves so that it doesn't seem as shocking when other people attack you. But then again, it doesn't really help matters, because it just becomes a cycle. But you can actually use the replacement method, which is something that I learned from another YouTube channel that I'm going to link in the description box below. So this therapist actually encourages people to reverse the inner critic. So for example, you may have like self-sabotaging thoughts, right? Like, oh, I am not good enough, and I'm not going to be able to do well in something anyway, so I'm not going to put in as much effort because I don't think I'm going to succeed anyway, even if I do it. And that is a self-sabotaging thought that you may or may not be aware of. But a lot of people who do not feel good enough tend to have that thought. But you can actually use it as an opportunity to reverse the thought by thinking of a more encouraging one. Like, if I put in effort, I would actually do really well. Like, if I put in effort, I would actually excel in this area. And so by reversing that criticism, that is most likely something that you have also internalized, you can actually create a lot more encouragement that is going to help you to get better at what you're doing. Also, share your own tips with dealing with TE criticism if you have some. And remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.